Hello there, I'm Roger Bloor, and I'd like to welcome you to the launch of Judith Wozniak's debut pamphlet, Patient Watching, which is from the Hedgehog Press, Mark Davidson's press. And we've got a number of things happening tonight. Judith's going to read from part of the Heroic Crown, which starts her pamphlet. We've got 4 guest readers, and Judith's then going to read some selected poems from the remainder of her pamphlet. The Canada Water Group, which is hosting this event, is a group of poets who met doing an MA in writing poetry through Newcastle University, but we met at the poetry school at Canada Water, hence the name. And we carried on meeting afterwards in something you'll remember called Real Life, and then continued throughout the last 2 years in this virtual form. So welcome to the Canada Water Group meeting room. Judith's pamphlet is based on her experience as a general practitioner. Judith spent her working life as a general practitioner. She, as all the other readers actually have tonight, has an MA in writing poetry from the poetry school. And her poems have been published in anthologies, including These Are the Hands for the NHS. And in the last year, her poems have appeared in The South, The Alchemist's Spoon, Artemis Poetry, Fenland Poetry Journal, South and London Grip. In 2020, she had an excellent year. She won first prize, not only first prize, in the Hippocrates competition in the health professional category, but also joint third prize. And went from success to success, being commended in the Poets Meet Politics competition in 2020, 2021. She won the second prize in the Grey Hen poetry competition and was shortlisted for the Wells poetry competition. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Judith to read us a selection from her Heroic Crown, A Fortunate Man.
It's not what I expected to find, a call for young Rosie with abdominal pain, bent over the kitchen table, clutching her back, the dogs yapping and worrying at my ankles. I examine her under layers of baggy clothes. She's in labour. I break the news to her mother, who wears a load of nonsense expression. No, not my Rosie, she's going to college. The midwife arrives in time, takes charge, comfortingly upholstered into her uniform. I worry when Rosie won't hold her baby, but her mum coaxes the small bundle between them until Rosie holds her and names her Marjorie. You never know anything for certain. You never know anything for certain. Elsie had cared for her sister for decades. I discover a secret sat between them. The daughter her sister would never discuss, her disgrace, taken from her at birth. Every night, one each side of the hearth, they hoarded the past until for one of them, it became a trickle of memory. She shows me a crumpled letter tucked in the pocket of her pleated tweed skirt. It's from her niece. Elsie has been in touch with her for years. Now her sister has died. Should she meet her? Try to make amends. They trust me with their secrets and fears. They trust me with their secrets and fears. Her husband twists his wedding ring. She balls a damp hanky in her fist, tries to order her tumble of worries. It's their grandson. They took him in when his parents could no longer cope. He shouts at them, shuts himself away. She knows he steals from her purse. Last night he smashed up his room. They're frightened to be alone with him. I have tried to get this troubled lad help for years. Sometimes it takes a crisis. I rely on this tight-knit community. I rely on this tight-knit community. On my rounds, I often see Flo, her sparse curls squashed under a hairnet. The sun tide mark where her nut brown arms meet her rolled up sleeves. Hinged forward, she hurries as if trying to catch herself up. Busy delivering a box of newly laid eggs, warm from her hens, pots of damson jam, plump tomatoes and a twist of paper. Left on doorsteps of the newly bereaved, housebound. Her seesaw gait is worse. She needs a new hip, but refuses to leave her mother's ashes buried on her land. I know all they had with each other. I know all they have is each other. My tyres crunch over frosted gravel along an unmade track I know so well. A fox startles in the beam of headlights as my Jeep rolls over a rut in the road. Her husband waits at the end of the path, an old jacket pulled over his pajamas, hair tangled from another restless sleep. He stands too close, questions spill over, every detail rehearsed while he waited. We climb upstairs to a solitary light. I check, talk to her all the while, though she has already slipped away. I will stay with them both in the quiet of the night. She waits up in the quiet of the night. Sometimes I sit outside, watch the light change. I glimpse her in the corner of my mind's eye. It's enough she's there. I witness how my patients struggle, watch how their stories unfold in the melt of time. Share with them lived moments of joy and sorrow. Soaking up the suffering of others can tip me into despair. She listens. I think anguish has its own timescale. So I work harder to run ahead of death. I need these people as they need me, and count myself a fortunate man. I have cared for some since childhood. Often all I can do is watch and wait, ensure they have all the care they need. I stay vigilant so nothing is missed, notice when they change, sometimes tell them what they don't want to hear. I learn from what happens on my watch. It's not always what I expect to find. You never know anything for certain. They trust me with their secrets and fears. I rely on this tight-knit community. We know all we have is each other. I think of them in the quiet of the night and count myself a fortunate man. Thank you.
Thanks again so much, Judith, and superb weaving in of all those detailed facts through that narrative and its focus and framework on the fortunate man. Amazing comments in the chat box as well, which if you want to save, you can save by clicking on the relevant dot site. So we've now got Judith's first reader, guest reader, who is Diana Kant, again a member of the Canada Water Group. Diana is a child psychotherapist. Her poems have been published in a variety of anthologies and magazines, including Finnish Creatures, Ink, Sweat and Tears, and The Alchemy Spoon. And she's been placed in a number of competitions recently, including Spelt, The Plough, On the Lake, and was voted Canterbury People's Poet in 2021. Her pamphlet Student Bodies 1968 was published in 2020 by Clayhanger Press, and her most recent pamphlet, a second one, At Risk, The Lives Some Children Live, was published by Dempsey and Windle in 2021. So Diana's going to read us 2 poems.
Thank you, Roger. It's an enormous honour and a pleasure to be asked to read at the launch of Judith's wonderful pamphlet. I first met Judith standing on the pavement outside the Poetry School on Lambeth Walk, as it was then. A group of us rather anxiously gathered for the start of what proved to be a wonderful 2 years of a poetry MA. And what's indelibly imprinted on my memory is her beaming, welcoming smile, which has survived throughout the MA and beyond. Judith will say she's got a talking face. Well, she's also got a talking way with words too, as these poems attest, and a capacity to convey with a deceptive simplicity a profound sense of what it means to be human. Fortunate indeed, the patient who was lucky enough to have Judith as their GP. One of the poems I'm going to read tonight, requested by Judith herself, and it's a bit like a poetry, Desert Island Discs, I think, also echoes a little of the professional role of watching and listening from my working life as a child psychotherapist. So it addresses the issue of dyslexia and how sometimes young people can be placed in the wrong educational setting, which can sometimes make things worse rather than better, and it can also be hard to challenge. And the second of my poems focuses on sibling rivalry, and that's absolutely from my own personal experience. So this is Callum versus County Education Authority, 2018, Court of Appeal. There's a sound that's been following him around, a low hum, moving with him like a force field. He loves the way it sends him surging into spaces he hasn't been before, like opening an unknown door. That day he went to court, frisked and bag-checked, beckoned forward by officials. No comforting sound was with him then, only the hollow knocking of his fear. But oh, the glory of that place, the soaring arches, sweeping staircases, marbled floors, and patterns everywhere. And he, transported in surprise, his mother muted by her tears, a folder full of paperwork unread until his father said, "You tell them, son, what it's been like for you." And then the humming started, and the words poured out in shapes he hardly knew, tracing the patterns of his truth. How his teachers laughed when he read out loud, said he'd never pass exams, how the other kids all yelled out div, how he was labeled no matter what he did. He opened up his life and he was heard. Finding in his favor, the judge urged him to believe there was no ceiling to his success. The humming has been with him ever since, that low vibration only he can hear, a cat's contented purr, or more like bees, hive busy, creating patterns, making vaulted halls of sweetness, laying down supplies for the years ahead. And this is rocking. "You'd better come and meet them," said my dad, and so I did. Little choice at 4 years old, a gravel drive, broad sandstone steps, the entrance to the building strange and overwhelming. I may have taken presents, but my memory is freeze frame, no panning shots. Desperate to see my mother, her place taken by grandmother come to stay, whose rules must be obeyed. So frightened that I wet myself, hid my shorts under my bed. I climbed those steps, eager, excited, but sensing change. I don't remember what I wore. Perhaps the small grey shorts dried miraculously overnight. It started well enough. My dad opened the double doors, a huge hallway, tiled black and white, a dappled rocking horse, red velvet saddle waiting to be filled. I do remember what I saw. In my mother's arms, 2 tiny heads, her gaze on them, not me. I fled, back to the safety of the scarlet saddle, the rocking of a comfort I didn't have to share. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Diana. And one of the beauties of being part of the Candle Water Group is that we see these poems developing through workshops and so on, become old friends, which we've seen for quite a while, but seen them grow up and mature into these marvelous works. So we've now got our second guest reader, and I'd like to introduce Mary Mulholland. Mary's poems have been widely published in Ambit, Persevere, Arc, Finished Creatures, Under the Radar and elsewhere. And she's been highly commended in the Ambit 2021 competition, second and third prize in the Sentinel, shortlisted in Live Canon 2021 pamphlet and single poem, and a winner in the Poetry Society members competition. She's a former journalist and psychotherapist, and she's one of my fellow co-editors of The Alchemy Spoon and founded the Red Door Poets, and is a member of something that sounds quite frightening, which is the Crocodile Collective. And excellent news that on the 30th of January, which is coming fairly soon, her pamphlet collaborative with Simon Madrell and Vasiliki Albedo, All About Her Mothers, is being launched by 9 pens, worth tuning in, and the links are there on Eventbrite. And her first solo pamphlet, What the Sheep Taught Me, will be published this year by Live Canon, so an exciting year for Mary. So hand over now to Mary to read to us.
Thank you so much, Roger. And thank you, Judith, for so generously inviting me to read at the launch of your fabulous book. I love your poems. I've always loved them with their delicacy, their specificity and humanity. And I love the way Diana and I are wedged inside your stunning heroic crown, which I've never tried, and the tantalizing first half ending on a cliffhanger. It's not what I expected to hear. I hope everyone will buy your book. I highly recommend it. So my first poem is from the pamphlet that's forthcoming with Live Canon, and it's about a time I spent shepherding Barbados blackbelly sheep. This one concerns lambing time. The Nursery of Rejects. The newborn ewe shivers in her brown coat, ruby cord dangling, edges forward to be smelt, but is head-butted, sent somersaulting. Her brother, near identical, is licked all over. The mother's staccato bleats as she nuzzles and he suckles. The ewe lamb stamps her baby hoof when I force in the teat, refuses the bottle. I feel her rapid heartbeat, so much unseen. Like that experiment proving we need love and touch, I hold her close, really close, stroke her velvet black ears. My second is rather like Diana. It's one Judith particularly asked me to read, and it was published in Poetry News last year. It's called The Art of Daydreaming. My mother is gazing beyond the garden. A capuchin jumps in the rhododendron. She hears tree frogs behind the ticking of the grandfather clock. She has sugarcane blood. My mother's made of mango. She is pineapple. Dresses in laughter, passes darkness to her big-boned daughter to wear. Sometimes my beautiful mother sings as she peels potatoes. Her voice is alto. When she tries soprano, she is a spider monkey. My beautiful mother's rings are loose on her fingers. She believes in rubies and gold to bring her good luck. She likes to lose herself in dreams. And had I not gone to Madelecution, I'd have answered her call, not heard her voice later, too late to ring back, naming me in her sing-song way, as if saying goodbye. Sometimes we just get it wrong. That night I was too big-boned dumb. By next morning, my beautiful mother is wading back to her childhood, ankle deep in warm rain. My mother is an Amazonian water lily. She's floating on dark water. Her petals unfurl like Christmas decoration. She doesn't see the caiman's amber eyes watching, waiting, the green anaconda dangling from a branch, the harpy eagle that will soar her to the canopy's green mantle. My mother doesn't like green. Her breathing has become the ocean. She rushes in to pause on the Demerara silt shore, rushes out to rejoin the ocean at the horizon. My mother waves thrash at the seawall. She's wearing foam lace, ribboning the air in clouds that shapeshift, turn electric blue. My morpho butterfly mother is sky. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Mary, and a great preview of what we have to come with the collaborative pamphlet, which I'm really looking forward to. So we're now going to move on to the third guest reader. So I'd like to introduce Vanessa Lampard. Vanessa, I said I wouldn't say it again, but completed her MA Poetry School in 2019. She won the Cafe Writers, the Edward Thomas and Sentinel Poetry Prizes and the Ver Prize 2 years running. She's been runner-up in the Fish, the Yeovil, Oxford Rooks and Kent and Sussex Prizes, with poems commended in a number of other competitions, Bridport, Troubadour and Newcastle Prizes and the National Poetry Competition 2020. Her poetry is widely published, most recently in Magma, The Moth, the Oxford Times and Poetry Wales. She's the third co-editor of The Alchemy Spoon and teaches poetry to children for Learn with Leaders in India online. She runs workshops, which is run for Hive South Yorkshire, Albury Poetry Festival, the Poetry School London and My Stanza Group. A pamphlet on Long Loan is published by Live Canon. Vanessa's an acupuncturist in Oxfordshire, and when she's not sticking needles into people, she's working on her first full collection. So I'll hand over to Vanessa to read to us.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much, Judith, for inviting me to read at your launch. And if anyone wants to know anything new about Judith, please note she has 4 readers at her launch, which says a lot about the kind of person she is. She's just a very generous, lovely, warm person to know. And I got to know her really when Judith and Diana were in Newcastle on the Newcastle Poetry Festival, and they let me be their friend. It's just a joy to be here, and a heroic crown is certainly not called that for nothing, is it? I don't know how you did that. That's just amazing. I've got 2 poems about, both of them are about growing up in the 1970s. The first of them I wrote on a workshop with Judith, and it's called Sand. On Willicombe Beach, my grandpa builds an MG convertible sports car from sand in front of the swing boats where I was sick once. My car faces the wind-ruffled sea, roof down, under a sky made from torn paper strips. Grandpa slowly carves the bonnet and makes me a member of the AA. He shapes the wheels and stands back, proud as a car salesman. Other kids are staring. They want to be me. In a few weeks, my parents will separate, but now our orange windbreak holds them close together in flowery beach chairs, safe from the wind. I sit behind the steering wheel of my new MG. The engine starts first try. I take her out for a spin to Lundy Island to see the puffins and the granite stacks and back, beeping my horn to warn the surfers who wave. I park her where she was before, facing out to sea. Mum looks up from her book and says, It must be time for a 99. I want to jump on my car before we leave and ruin her so no one else can ruin her, but Grandpa won't let me. He takes my hand in his, saying, "Don't look back, let's go."
So with a rather unsmooth handover, I'm going to hand back to Vanessa to introduce the next reader.
And the last reader, last of Judith's guest readers, is Roger. Roger Bloor has an MA in poetry writing from Newcastle University, from Poetry School, and is the founder of Clayhanger Press and co-editor of the Alchemy Spoon Poetry magazine. His work has been published in Magma, Poetry London, Allegro, and a number of anthologies, including the Hippocrates Prize Anthology 2017 and 2019, Words for the Wild Anthology 2018, the British Anthology 2018 and 2019, Landscape Anthology 2018, Poems for the NHS 2018. These are the Hands 2020, Effect Publications, Stillborn, and the Language of Salt Fragmented Voices 2020. His pamphlet, A Less Clear Dream, was shortlisted for the Arnold Bennett Book Prize 2018, and his poetry book, Al Yeddersley, was shortlisted for the Arnold Bennett Book Prize 2019. He was the prize winner of the 2019 Poetry London Claw Prize. And if you don't know what that is, it's a very, very, very big prize indeed. And instead of spending the money on heroin like a normal poet, he set up Clayhanger Press. He was commended in the Hippocrates Poetry Prize 2017 and 2019 and was awarded joint second prize in the 2021 competition. His poem Memory Stack Overflow Error was highly commended in the AUB International Poetry Competition 2021, and his collection Stacking Winter Wood was published by Dempsey and Windle in June 2021. Go for it, Roger.
Thanks, Vanessa. And I'm pleased that my work has not been wasted, and I spent the afternoon teaching Vanessa how to pronounce the Old English Al Yeddersley, and she got it right. So there you are. I can go home now. And so I'm just going to read two poems. One about one of my favourite places, which is the Isle of Man, this wild place with such history and interwoven history from so many cultures. It's every time I go, poems follow me home. This is called December the 20th, 1857. A wildness of place draws tight around Niarbyl Bay tonight. Driven down from South Barrule through tight-clawed trees, stooped back to sea, stood hard to stone-walled lanes that lead to waiting shore. Off Niarbyl Point, the Earl of Carrick, iron screw steamer, 300 tons, 14 crew, 2 passengers, out of air for Liverpool, heading south-southwest. Ahead, the lights of Calf of Man, grasped briefly through the spray and roll, a lee shore sighted close, helm hard a port, engines stopped, pushed back to rocks and stove into, she breaks in sight of shore. From the bay we watch them plucked by 2s and 3s to seas so high our boats can neither reach nor save. Just 2 survive to grasp our ropes and struggle to the beach. And on the next day tide, the body of the stewardess, a fine young woman of 24, clothed only in her petticoat, will wash ashore. The ship and cargo well insured. Miss Cameron is not. And the second one takes me back to a stage of my development slightly before, when I was a lot younger and spent Sunday afternoons bored sitting in a Methodist chapel during the service. And there was a group of us boys who were herded into there to stop us causing trouble elsewhere. And one of our main amusements was to chew the little pew slips into little gobby balls and flirt them at our friends. And this is a poem about that, which is called Another Miracle. Pine-boarded walls of simple faith surround and insulate the chapel folk. Bleeding knots, stigmata from the tree, entice the sticky-fingered boys, heads below the pew, shiny trousered, sliding on the oak, chewing pew slips, spittle-soaked and grey. God's little messengers, in parabolic parable, ascend and rise again with glutinous intent, but aberrant trajectory, distorted westward by a Pentecostal wind. The gunner, sensing danger, lapses into fervent prayer, forswearing pleasures, comics, sweets, in Faustian mood, trading his soul, his chewing gum, his mouse. But please, O Lord, if you are there, and Mother says you are, outstretch thy hand, disturb the air, and cause my gobby pellet to descend elsewhere than on the preacher's head, which spot it is, as thou dost know, at present much intent upon. I ask this, Father, not for me, well, sort of, but if thou wilt, then could thou hurry up, because I greatly fear it will in several seconds coincide in spatial terms with Reverend Turner's holy year. And so it came to pass, but only by an inch or so. And there, as yet another miracle trailed its sluggish way along the plastered wall, a spark of faith was lit by holy intervention in the passage of a ball of paper, mortal sin, and spit. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Diana, Mary, Vanessa, and Roger, for your wonderful poems and for your friendship and helpful and insightful feedback to me. My last set of poems are based on my own experiences from being a medical student, when you're supposed to observe and notice patterns of illness so that you can recognize them in the future. This poem may help explain how a childhood memory of my father may have led to me doing medicine. Pattern recognition. All I can do is watch from the edge of things, pressed against the cool tiled wall in my white coat with a blue flash, allowed only to observe. They crash through bendy doors from the ambulance bay, a man brought in on a blue light, outrunners in green scrubs, masks slung under their chins, the trolley along the corridor, a clatter of white clogs. I watch them tap the back of his hand, hunt for a vein, cut away his clothes, shave some chest hair to help the electrodes stick, his skin slicked with sweat, pale as damp dough. I know this look. I have seen this look, pale as damp dough, slicked with sweat, his shirt stuck to his chest. She loosens his tie, worries at the buttons. I didn't know he was hairy. The doctor holds his wrist, listens to his chest. I watch them. He's slumped in the chair. Blue lights pulse the ceiling, the front door wide open. Men in shiny black shoes standing in the hallway, the crackle of a radio. I know I have to be still, shiver in my nightie, pressed against the anaglypta, on the edge of things. All I can do is watch. As a GP, you're just part of a team, and that's especially true in sort of child protection, when you depend on everybody else's eyes and ears to pick up the cues. Sometimes people slip through, children slip through. Invisible. Nobody notices your trousers concertina around your feet, but you keep having to hitch them up to meet the pale moon of skin beneath your school t-shirt. Nobody feels able to hug you. If they did, they would feel the hollows crumple between your ribs, your twig-thin arms. Nobody remarks how often you fall asleep on your desk, cradled in the crook of your elbow, dark circles etched around your eyes. Nobody watches you shuffle around the playground, clinging onto your loose scuffed shoes with your toes. Nobody pats your head, feels the stiffness of your uncombed hair. Nobody stops to wonder if anyone shampoos it in the bath, makes soap spikes stick up to make you laugh, scoops water over your head, taking care not to sting your eyes. Nobody knows you only have half a sandwich in a carrier bag. You don't have a lunchbox with secret pockets for surprise snacks. Nobody sees you snaffle leftover scraps, discarded apple cores, hoping to find a crust with a smear of peanut butter. Nobody worries you walk home alone, shivering in your thin coat, kicking the leaves, taking your time because you know nobody is there for you. It's often the problems that it's often not the acutely the problems that it's often the things that you can do very little about, and these things sometimes come back to haunt you. Disclosure. Sometimes I just have to wait in the thick silence of a held breath and hope the phone won't ring, that nobody knocks with coffee, aware of the echo of children playing in the school nearby. As if to glance at my watch, try not to pierce the stillness. Everything else can wait. What I say next will matter. A letter arrives the next day, delivered by hand, marked private and confidential. She says she is so sorry. It's her fault. She misled me. She thinks I must have noticed the smudge on her cheek, covered up with makeup. At home they all know how clumsy she can be. She asked me not to reply. I'm driven to the safe house through a puzzle of back streets, a wary greeting from women still tight together, holding babes in arms. It's a school day. I'm there to talk to them. First, I listen to their stories. They're angry with doctors. I learn the power of sorry. I don't recognize her at first, sitting alone at the back. Before I read my last poem, I'd like to thank Rebecca Goss for her early encouragement on the Arvon course when I just started writing poetry. It was Rebecca who suggested the poetry school and Tammy Yoslov's inspirational Roots into Poetry course, which led on to the MA in writing poetry. It's a testament to the tutors, Tammy Yoslov, Glyn Maxwell, and my terrific fellow students that a retired GP managed to write poems. It's been a great adventure. Last but not least, thank you, dear Roger, for organising this event on behalf of the Canada Water Poetry Group. And finally, Holding a Stranger. I stay with a stranger lying in the road, in a pool of light from a street lamp. He has a pulse. I feel the brush of his breath as I lean in close to ask his name. I doubt. There's nobody about. He's slipping away. I think he says, "Don't leave me." It begins to snow. I cover him with my coat, fumble my frosted fingers to call for help. I shout again. Across the street, the torch flicks on, curtains move, then darkness. Is this how it was for you that night? Did somebody hold you, ask your name, or turn out the light, leave it to another to find you when it was too late? Thank you.
Okay, so what an excellent evening and some brilliant readings, Judith. I just would like to just sort of finish off by just reading, because I think it's really excellent, is from Tammy Ossolov's appreciation of your books. I think it says everything about the pamphlet. It says, Judith's many years of empathetic observation as a GP provide the lens through which we view John Berger's seminal work describing the life of a country doctor. Add to that a considerable skill as a poet in shaping this moving narrative into a formal sonnet sequence, creating a heroic crown for a heroic man. Elsewhere in this debut pamphlet, she relates her own experiences in medical practice in poems that are vital and compassionate, but never sentimental. The power of her work to show us ourselves at our most vulnerable, but to find in those moments something redemptive and beautiful. And I think that really does describe so well this excellent debut pamphlet, Judith. So thanks so much for everybody's attending. We've had 65, I think, people that are reading, which is excellent. And thanks from me to the guest readers and to Judith. And let's hope at some point we can all meet again in the 3D version of the reading and share our drinking instead of drinking in solitary little boxes. Thanks very much. Cheers, Judith.
Thank you, Roger. Thanks, everyone.
Judith, can you hang on afterwards?
Thank you so much. Brilliant. Brilliant. Brilliant.